All right. So Mike Hathaway, I'm going to let him share with you about the world and life of taxidermy. Ask questions, pay attention.
Yeah, participate. Help me out. Ask me any kinds of questions. I've been doing taxidermy for probably over 40 years now. I just had an interest one day, and a friend showed me how to mount a pheasant. So I started with just one of those, and then it kind of kept going and kept going. There's a group in Utah, it's called the Utah Taxidermist Association, and they have a yearly convention where they have competitions, and I used to compete and try to win ribbons and do the best, most lifelike animals that you could do. And so it just turned into a full-time business. I worked out at a power plant for 10 years and hated it. And I'll say one thing. I know there's people today working in a power plant that probably shouldn't be working in a power plant. And I know there's people today that are probably doing taxidermy that shouldn't be doing taxidermy. You know, there's this little book about horrible taxidermy, you know. So it's important that you have interest in it. And I've always had an interest in wildlife. And I've loved animals. I just, you know, it's kind of ironic that I do this because I love animals, but I think they're meant for us to use. They're put here for our use. It's a renewable resource. We have deer multiply, pheasants and birds, they all multiply. It's all a renewable resource. And so it has to be managed. And that's why we have conservation officers and departments that manage wildlife so that we don't lose something. Now, Delta used to be the mecca for pheasants in Utah, but because of agricultural changes and predators and different things, now we don't see very many pheasants. We used to have tons of pheasants. But so tell me, these guys that were in my shop last night know, break down the word taxidermy. What are the two words? Taxi, okay, and dermy. What does a taxi do? Yeah, it moves you around. What does an airplane do when it's getting ready to take off? Taxis into position onto the runway so it can take off. So you call it taxiing. Okay, so taxi means to move, position, or locate. Okay, so what's the second word? Dermy. What's derma? What's dermy? There's a doctor called a dermatologist. What does he work on? Skin. Okay, so what does taxidermy mean? Move, position, or locate the skin. And so part of what I had to learn to do taxidermy was, well, you tell me what I had to learn. Can you make a deer look like a deer if you don't know what a deer looks like? Okay, so you get reference material. You go out and study the animal. You learn its habits and how its ears work and its eyes. You learn all this stuff about different animals. You have to learn about the anatomy. And nowadays, we can pass these catalogs around, or you can look at them at your leisure. But today, there are big companies that manufacture the armatures or the mannequins for taxidermy. And so this is a deer mannequin, and they have done a pretty good job of reproducing something, and they have it in all different sizes and shapes and forms. But the anatomy is pretty close. So I don't have to do a lot for this. In the olden days, the old-time taxidermists 100 years ago, they had to make their own armatures to put skin on. And they used plywood and 2x4s, and they used the actual skulls of an animal, and they would clean it and preserve it with arsenic and strychnine and things that would kill you, because they didn't know in those days. And then they would just reproduce it with just bones and with what they had. Today we have an industry of of manufacturers that manufacture. So that involves someone who has really studied anatomy and has learned how to sculpture. This form was originally probably sculptured in clay, and they got it to where they wanted it, and then they make a fiberglass mold, and they'll bolt the mold together and mix up urethane foam, pour it in the mold, and it expands, pressurizes, and makes this mannequin. And there are thousands and thousands of mannequins for every kind of animal you can think of. So for taxidermy, you have to know some of the anatomy. You have to know how to skin an animal and preserve the integrity of its eyes and its ears, the nose. You have to be able to turn their feet inside out, like on this bear skin. You have to be able to skin this and take all the bones out of the toes without cutting big holes in it. And the first ones I've done, I had to sew up some holes because you get better with repetition. And so you have to know how to skin the animal. It helps to take good references like measurements, because these are all different sizes. You have to know the measurement from the corner of the eye to its nose, the circumference on its neck. So you're matching the skin to the right size mannequin. There's symmetry. Who knows what symmetry is? Yeah, same on both sides. You got to have your eyes that are equal. You can't have one eye higher than the other or lower. You want to keep the symmetry right on the animal. Just a study on ears and eyes. Animals can do a lot of things with their eyes and ears. You can make a mountain lion look alert, or you can make them growl and they'll almost close their eyes squinted closed and their ears are laid right back on a mountain lion, or you can have him just happy, just casual, nice, calm. And so you study all these different things. You need to make sure, okay, so how did I get these skins like this, where they're nice and soft? And I didn't do this. So there is a commercial field of work in tanning. Tanneries that when I took this skin in, it's like Mr. Myers is going to bring me an elk today. I have to skin the head, turn the ears inside out, flesh the lips and the eyes, and flesh the skin. And then I will, after I have the nice clean skin that I've taken all the flesh off, I salt them. You put them in a salt. I have a salt shed where I just cover the skin with salt. What's the salt going to do? It's going to dry it out, and it's going to stop what? Bacteria is an enemy. If he left that elk sitting in the back of his truck today and it was 70 degrees, it's going to spoil. And the hair is going to slip off, and you just have to throw the skin away. So you flesh it and salt it, and the salt pulls the moisture out, and it stops the bacteria. It's an antibacterial. So once it's dried out enough, then I send them to a tannery, and the tannery will do their thing. So the tanning process, I do some tanning. The tanning process is then I rehydrate them, and once they're cleaned up a little bit, then I put them in a pickle, which is, who knows what pH is? You learn what pH is? It's the scale of acidic or caustic, or 7 is neutral. To tan a skin, you need to put it in a pickle, an acid pickle that brings the pH down to around 2. You want it quite acidic. You have salt in with the water, and that washes all the natural fluids out of the skin. Then after it's pickled, you'll rinse it, and then in these big tanneries, they have rotary knives, which I have one in my shop, but they have tables with these knives that is just a metal blade that has a knife on the edge and it's spinning, and they just shave the skin down to where it's thin. Once you get the skin shaved, get everything down to where it's nice and smooth, then you neutralize the acid, put it into a tanning solution, and there are a myriad of different chemical solutions that will tan a skin. The Indians used to use tree barks, and they used to smoke them over fires. You know all the stories about the Indians chewing on leather to make it soft. So tanning in itself is a industry and an art that just to be able to make a nice skin. There's a fur industry still in America. It's not as big as it used to be. How many of you guys know somebody that goes out and traps? So bobcat market, you know, one bobcat pelt, if it's a really nice pelt, can be worth around $1,000 just for one bobcat skin to the trapping society. There are still mink growers that grow mink. For mink production. So it's used for clothing, for raiment, a fur coat. So there are a lot of different uses of wildlife. This is a pronghorn antelope. So what's the difference between this and this? Come on, guys. What's the difference? These are horns. What's this? We always say deer horns. Are they deer horns? These are deer antlers. What's the difference between them? This is renewable. In a couple of months, what's going to happen with the deer that are running around with these? They're going to fall off. Wow, that's kind of crazy. Then within 4, 5, 6 months, they regrow them. Okay. This is a horned animal, like a buffalo, or there's probably 50 different varieties of antelope in Africa. And they don't necessarily shed their horns. These are actually solid, and they grow from keratin, kind of like our fingernails. And it's kind of a hair follicle type that creates a antelope horn. So when I get these in, I have to boil them for a couple hours, and this outer shell will come off, and there's a soft core inside that has hair. You can see the hair in it where it grows. You have to take that soft core out, and then there's a bone, and then I just fiberglass them back onto the bone. So this will go. Would this go on this mannequin? Probably wouldn't look too good, would it? Would this go on this mannequin? It wouldn't, because this is a white-tailed deer. This mannequin's for a mule deer. You could probably mount this with a mule deer cape, but it would look funny. It wouldn't match the type of animal it is. This is a white-tailed deer. So there's quite a different variety of just deer species. You have axis deer, you have fallow deer, you have white-tailed deer. You have probably 3 or 4 different varieties of white-tailed deer. You have Texas whitetails, eastern whitetails. You have Coues deer that are down in Mexico and New Mexico and Arizona. There's the little tiny Coues deer. So there's several different kinds of white-tailed deer. You have the mule deer, which is pretty common. There's also a black-tailed deer up in British Columbia and up in the northwest. There's Alaska has black-tailed deer, and they're similar to a whitetail, but they're not a whitetail. They're a different. So there's a myriad of different species of deer in America. We have 3 or 4 different varieties of elk. We have Tool elk, Yellowstone elk. Help me out, Chad. Or the other elk. I wasn't planning on doing this for a living, but I love animals and I love wildlife, and I found out that I had some of the talents necessary to do it, and I guess the patience and the willingness to do it, to skin an animal and learn how to put it back together and make it look presentable. The thing that I probably regret is that I didn't go to college and get a degree in environmental or ecosystems or animal sciences, something that would have led me to where I could go work in a museum as a curator, as a taxidermist in a natural history setting, because I've done some mounts that, like a red fox mounted off of an old fence post with jumping up in the air and have a pheasant right off of his nose. That's showing natural history. That's teaching you that these two animals have to interact with each other. Correct? So could the mountain lion, could this cougar in the wild exist without the mule deer? Probably couldn't, could it? So there's an interaction between those two animals. So the thing I regret not doing is going and learning more about ecosystems and how one life form relies upon another one. You know, we have all kinds of animals that interact with one another. Did I answer your question about? I just love wildlife, and so when I learned how to do this, I felt, you know, there's an opportunity to make a career out of it. You know, and I probably don't make as much money as I would have made if I'd have stayed out at IPP power plant, but I don't know if I would have been happy. You know what I mean? So what I would say is, if you have a real interest in something, pursue that interest. Do something that you like to do. Don't go take a job that you took because it's lots of money or, you know, this or that. Go do something that you're meant to do. So. Any other questions?
Like, how long does it usually take to
Like a shoulder, it comes in steps, because when I get a deer in my shop, like say I have to skin it, and skinning a deer, like with Mr. Myers bringing me that elk, it'll take me probably an hour and a half to skin the head, because he's going to bring it to me with it cut off right here at the skull, and then I'll still have to skin the face, turn the ears inside out. You can see on this antelope where these are its ears and they've been turned inside out. So that's actually the antelope's ear. Cartilage is still on it. You just turn everything inside out, split the eyelids, the nose. Just that process of that on an elk head would take me probably an hour and a half to get it salted. Once I get it back from the tannery, I rehydrate the skin, because like if I wanted to mount this antelope, I would get it wet again and it would soften up. It would take me probably another hour or two to pull the cartilage off the ears, make ear liners. I make all my own ear liners. You can buy them. So I do this. when I get low on ears for deer and elk and that, I have patterns. This is a material, it's called fabric form. Comes in just a flat sheet, and I have patterns for ears, and I'll just cut them out. So they're just a flat piece of material. You stick it in a pot of boiling water, put that in the hot water, and while it's still hot, you shape it over the mold. And then when it cools, you take it off and you have an ear. And this is what goes inside of a deer. That goes inside the skin right here. So it'd take me another hour or so just to pull the cartilage, get my ear liners ready. Once I have that, and then it takes you a while to set your antlers on the mannequin. So with the skinning process and that, and the time actually mounting this where it's mounted, probably 6 hours in putting a deer head together. And then you can see this one still has this carding on the ears because I put everything together with glue. So when I put that ear liner in, it's glued in, and then I staple it so that it stays good and flat. This is probably about ready to where I can pull all those staples, brush out the ears, and fluff them up. I have a two-part epoxy that you mix up that smooths out inside the nose and around the eyes. And then you use an airbrush. Who's ever used an airbrush, done artwork with an airbrush? And so I use an airbrush with really fine tip to paint inside the nose and the outer part of the nose. So then you still have your finish work at the end. But probably work-wise, hands-on to do a deer head like that, probably 6 to 10 hours of work goes into this. And most shops now, I've heard that some shops up north are charging over $1,200 for a deer head. So if you could mount a couple in a day, you could make some money. You know, I admit I can make money on a deer head, but whether you want to pound them out and do, 10 a week, or if you want to just take your time and be artistic, you start doing life-size mounts, like a full-body bear or mountain lion. After you have the animal mounted, then you still have to build a habitat for it, or something that you can display it. And these companies make, they've gone out and actually made rubber casts of actual rocks, and then they'll pour this foam in the mold, and you can have artificial rocks that are really lightweight. So I'll take those and I'll cut it in pieces and design a rock that matches the mount, and then you have to finish it, paint it, and so you're into doing a life-size mount. You can spend a week just on a life-size bear or a life-size mountain lion. By the time you mount it, finish it, do the base work, but you're going to charge $5,000 for a life-size lion or bear. So it's all different. Taxidermists have different price settings. I don't really follow what others do. I just try to set my prices where I feel it's fair, that I can give them a good quality piece of art, and I can still make some money. But I really like cats. I really like mountain lions and bobcats, but mule deer, probably the most prevalent thing you do is a mule deer in our area. And mule deer are pretty cool. Yeah, I was telling the kids last night, did you know mule deer have hinges? I mean, all your deer have hinges in their ears. They have, I'll kind of show you right here. So there's a cartilage flap that comes right here that's attached to muscles. And then there's a muscle down here Well, they interact with each other, and a deer can either put its ears straight forward, but then if they're running or scared, they'll turn their ears and turn right straight back because they have a hinge there. So those are the things you learn when you start skinning an animal and dissecting the skin. You can see how that works. And so when you remount it, all this right here, I put the ear liner in there. All this right here is just clay. It's just a soft, like potter's clay they used to put on potter's wheels. It's just a clay that will dry hard. And so once I get the ear liner in, then I measure out my clay. So you have to have equal parts or you lose your symmetry. You can't have one ear bigger than the other ear. Then I just wrap that clay around this ear liner and shape it, and you put it on the mannequin. Same with the eyes. The eyes are actually set in clay. This orbit where they have this cut out, I put clay in there, set the eye in, and then I can turn the eye and get it to, most of these eyes nowadays, the manufacturing of eyes, they've done a really good job of reproducing eyes. Pass these around. Those are deer eyes. These different colors, different shapes, different. Here's one for cougar. Bears, bear eyes. All the different kinds of animals have different colors, different sizes of eyes. And most of your animals like deer and elk and your cattle and all those antelope have a slit pupil. You know what a slit pupil is? The pupil of the eye is elongated, kind of like a pill. Well, your predators like cougars and bears, they just have a round dot pupil. Foxes and bobcats have a slit pupil that goes up and down. So you learn different anatomies of different animals, different ways their eyes work. But when you're doing a deer and elk, I learned this by going to taxidermy shows, but that slit pupil on a deer is always horizontal. Even if the animal looks down, the eye stays somewhat horizontal, the pupil. And so when I went to these taxidermy shows, the judges that judge them will come around with flashlights, and they'll actually shine lights in their eyes and in their nose and ears. They want to see how much detail you put back into this animal to see if the pupils are or even if you got one tilted wrong, and they'll judge you on that. They had a score sheet that had like 100 points on it, and they would look for pinholes. They would look at because you have to sew this back up down the back. When you put the skin on, it's usually split down the back. You have to sew it back together, and you have to sew it so you're not going to see the seam. And so you got to be real careful if you're going to go put one in a competition that they can't feel or see the seam where you sewed it up. That's kind of tricky. So those are just some of the things you need to learn how to do taxidermy, is how to dissect and skin the animal, preserve the skin, know the anatomy, how to make it look natural, back to its natural way, how to do finish work, how to do habitat. There's quite a bit to it. I do welding, and I weld my own brackets and that for mounts. If somebody wants a mount that's freestanding, you can weld a armature. If you guys are interested in welding, that's something that's helpful for me to know how to do, because I can weld a bracket for a pedestal elk, or I don't have to have somebody else do it. I can do it myself. So it's just a fun job. it's a pain sometimes, and I've tried to teach other people how to do it, and they've said, oh, that's too much work for me. They want an easier job. But you have to balance whether the work you decide to do is easy or if it's rewarding. Not to put down anybody that works out at the power plant, but out there I couldn't see the end of my labors. The thing that you were producing at the power plant is that power going down a cable to California to turn lights on in California. I couldn't really see that. You know, I could go sweep a floor, or I could go, you know, run a coal up a conveyor belt. But that's not as rewarding as what I get out of seeing a really neat animal in its finished phase. You know, so gotta love what you do. What do most of you guys want to do? Still figuring it out? Have you got your goals set? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here in Millard County. You got agriculture. You got all these renewable resources, whether it's in plant propagation, whether you want to learn how to make the best alfalfa hay, or raise the best dairy cows, or, you know, we have the resources here. You guys can succeed. But we got some really neat wildlife too. Question?
We each have multiple questions on the paper.
Okay. Probably doing a life-sized mountain goat or a bighorn sheep, where you have to mount the animal, you know, and do all that part, but then you still have to build the rocks or the armature, the base that you're going to put it on, and the display. Dr. Bloomfield, he just went to Africa last year, and I have probably 6 or 7 African antelope that he wants me to mount. And he showed me a picture of a mount that was online, and it had a wall that had rocks, and it had all these African animals on one great big wall with habitat and rocks and grass and stuff behind them. And he wants to do something like that. So if you start adding a presentation with rocks and habitat, then it gets more complicated. Because then you still have to hang each one of those mounts amongst all of that. And so it's a design thing too. So with life-size mounts, that's probably the hardest and most time-consuming. Just a deer head to hang on the wall, just a standard deer head like this, pretty easy, because once I have it mounted like this, do the finish work, it's done. You know, they just go hang it on the wall. I don't have to build rocks or bases or anything. So it's just the degree of difficulty of add-ons. What's that? I used to love to do waterfowl, and I still can do stuff for myself, but I do not do it commercially for other people because of the federal migratory permit and the regulations they put on it. So you have to make sure you comply with the laws. Last year was the first year I'd had this happen to me, but the state of Utah sent me an email that said that we are going to require you to have a permit number or tag number with every deer, elk, animal that you take in. You have to have a legal permit number with it that shows that it was legally taken. Because there is a problem with people who poach animals and make money on poaching, which is totally wrong. So like the bear here, that right there is the permanent Utah seal. If you shoot a bear or a cougar or bobcat in Utah, they have to be checked within so many hours by a conservation officer who will come and put a permanent tag in the animal. So I have a good rapport with Stetson. Have you had Stetson come in? What's that?
He came in about 2 weeks.
Stetson's awesome. I love Stetson. He's a good guy. And he knows me, and he knows I'm not out trying to do something illegal. So yeah. So I try to comply with all the laws and have tag numbers and names of who each one of these animals belong to, and records so that I'm in compliance. So there's a good reason we have law enforcement and conservation officers to. The other thing is like this year, up on Oak City. Oak City is a special draw unit for deer, but the boundary is the highway that are going through town. And this year, for some reason, a lot of the deer migrated before the deer hunt, and they were crossing the highway and going onto an open area. And so there were a lot of deer taken on a general tag on a unit that they're trying to protect and make the Oak City side a trophy unit for trophy deer. And so so the conservation officers have the job of trying to balance that and saying, well, they shot a lot of deer that were below the boundary. So that's their job, is to try to manage it so that we don't deplete a deer herd when we don't need to, or if we get an overpopulation of deer or any particular animal, they're gonna balance it so that that resource is managed for the good of the animal, hopefully, not for us. And they have fisheries. Did you talk about fisheries and
I think you did a little bit more on like the conservation.
Okay. So the other, have you had Mike Wardell? He's the biologist here. He's here. He lives out in Flowell too, or somewhere over on that side, Olden or somewhere. And he's a fish and game biologist. So they have conservation officers or law enforcement, and they also have jobs in biology. And the biologist's job is to, like in the spring, they'll go out and do deer counts, and they'll look for fawns and see they'll tag some deer, and then they'll watch them, and they'll do a fawn ratio to see how many fawns winter killed, and then they determine in the future what they're going to do with deer herds because of how many deer they lost because of a hard winter. And that's what biologists do. They take samples of animals that might be sick, or they'll go do gill netting programs on the lakes and reservoirs to gill net fish to see how many fish are in a particular area or what kinds of fish, what they need to do to better manage the fisheries. There's a lot involved with, and there's a lot of industry involved. Just these companies that do manufacture mannequins. I mean, I could go up any time because of the amount of work I could do. I could go up to one of the suppliers and spend $2,000 or $3,000 a trip just to buy mannequins for deer and elk and animals. But it generates money for the people that sculpture it and make them. Look at the hunting industry. How many of you guys go hunting? How much does it cost to buy a new rifle or a new bow, or even, for you to go camping for a week hunting? What did you just spend that puts it into the economy? Natural resources drive a lot of our economy, if you really look at it. I'm able to make a living doing taxidermy because people like to go hunting, and if they get a trophy, they want to present it. So I'm able to make a living, doing what I enjoy. So There's a lot involved.
Would be the easiest animal for a kid if they were one.
Pheasant or a chucker. Yeah, there's and if somebody's really interested and wants to get a chucker and come to me, I'd sit down and help them mount a chucker. I have when I did lots and lots of birds, I made my own molds for bodies because this pheasant, inside this pheasant right here, if you were to skin a pheasant and what the body would look like, I sculptured my own bodies and have my molds. So I just mix up a little bit of foam, pour it in the mold. I should have brought one today and popped it out, but it just makes a styrofoam ball basically shaped like a pheasant body. And then for the neck on the pheasant and the legs, I put a wire in that mannequin, the length I need for the neck, and then I just use like quilting batting and yarn, and I'll just wrap that batting with yarn to shape the neck. You turn the head inside out and clean the skull out, take the eyes and the brains and everything, all the meat out, and then you borax it with just borax. That's a preservative, drying agent. You put clay back inside the skull and where the eyes are, and then you flip the skin over that mannequin, and you have wires in the legs. There's wires that come from the mannequin down through the leg here and into this piece of wood. There's a wire in the leg. Yeah, pheasant or a chucker is pretty easy to mount, and only takes, once you get to where you know the anatomy and how to take care of them, I can mount a pheasant in probably 3 or 4 hours. And yeah, and you can use the wires. You can put wires in the wings, and you have them fly in and card all the feathers. You pin the feathers the way you want them, and then after they hang for a couple weeks, then the skin dries, and those feathers are going to stay. I've had people call me about it. I don't do domestics. I had a fellow I worked for years ago came out of California, and he had some people had their favorite horse died, and they brought it to him and wanted the horse taxidermy, but you can't put life back into them. And they wanted their, they weren't happy because it wasn't their horse anymore. It was just a mount. So I don't have much desire to do cats and dogs and horses and stuff. There are people that probably do it, but I don't.
If we were like another two-headed calf.
Yeah, a two-headed calf would be kind of cool for scientific, for natural history type stuff.
Do that in and out to save it.
Yep. Nature throws a curve once in a while. But,
What are you wanting?
I think it would be fun to participate with a group of curators to do a life-size elephant. It would take you weeks and weeks and weeks just to piece it together and put the skin together, and some of that African stuff is really cool. I worked for a shop when in between. I quit the power plant and I didn't have enough work, so a shop up in Utah County hired me. He did safaris, African stuff, and so I had the opportunity to mount some giraffe, a giraffe head mounts. It'd take me all day just to sew up the neck because it's 8-10 feet long on their neck. We did about a 14-foot crocodile, life size, kind of cool. Mounted some baboons, which is, a monkey has fingers. I mean, they kind of weird because it's a monkey, baboon. So I've mounted some really crazy stuff. I've thought I'd like to get a great big crocodile and mount it life size, standing, because they could stand pretty tall, and take the whole major part of the body out and make it into a couch so you could sit on it. Just crazy ideas, but exotic sheep, there's some Marco Polo sheep and that over in Asia that are just giant, have great big huge horns that hunters will go hunt argali or Marco Polo sheep. I've done New Zealand animals, tahr, chamois, red stags. There's just so many animals, and they're all, everything was put here to multiply its own sphere and element. And so there's animals that probably wouldn't do good here in the Mountain West. They do good in New Zealand or other parts of the world. The world's pretty big, and there's a lot of stuff out there. Just learn about it. Learn about it. Doing a deer head every day could get boring if you just did a deer head every day. But I break it up with doing an antelope or a cougar or doing bears and stuff like that. Do a lot of bear rugs. People just have the head mounted. This is for a bear rug. So you see how this is all artificial teeth and tongues that they make for them. Out of rubber, plastic. And so a lot of guys just want bear rugs where you just mount the head, and then I send them to a lady that sews the nice soft ruffles and the backing so they're nice and soft. Oh.
You can take one more client. How long? How much work?
Right now I'm probably a year out. I've got a year's worth of work right now to catch up. I could work for a year just doing lions and goats and deer and sheep and stuff from the last year or two. A lot of elk heads. I've got probably 10, 12 elk heads that need to be mounted right now. So yeah, I'd stay busy for quite a while. I don't try to take on new clients right now because I have a lot of return people that I've done work for years, and I just want to get stuff done. I'm getting old. I'm going to retire someday. Supposedly. Good luck. Yeah. Good luck with that. Oh, no. I don't know that there's a lot of new, young, up and coming taxidermists. There's a few, but it's a hard way to make a living, but you can do it. There's a taxidermist up in Utah County that now specializes in bighorn sheep, and he gets probably $7,000 or $8,000 for a bighorn sheep, and he has clients that bring him sheep every year, and they're mostly very wealthy clients who have the ability to go to Mexico to hunt desert sheep, or they can go to Alaska and hunt Dall sheep, or Canada and stone sheep every year. And so they're millionaires that are willing to pay whatever it takes just to display all those sheep. And so he's done really good doing that. You can specialize in certain types of animals. I like doing it all. I a squirrel or a little ermine, I can get as much enjoyment about mounting a little ermine than I can a great big elk or something. So we have such a diverse amount of animals that bobcats, foxes,
You had someone just starting out and they're trying to build a base, up to someone who's got a really clientele, willing to spend some money. What would you say is kind
Oh, I would I would encourage somebody to just start out part time and if you find you have the talent for it, you're going to pick up clients. You know, I would send some of my clients if they could show me that they can do really, really good work and start trading it over. But just start part time, which you could make if you did a deer head a week, you'd make $500-600 that week just doing one deer head a week. Pheasants, you can find a market to sell some mounted pheasants. You'd spend, you know, 5 or 6 hours mounting a pheasant and charge $200-300. You know, that's pretty good money for just a hobby. Just start as a hobby and you know, then build it up. Once you got to be I probably gross 120, 150,000 a year, but half that's going back into materials and tanning and all the overhead. That's a gross amount. That's not what I put in my pocket. So, but I have hundreds of animals to do right now. There are big shops that do safaris for people that go to Africa, and like say again, it's multimillionaires, so they don't care if they spend $200,000 or $300,000 on their taxidermy after they went to Africa. Not a big deal to them. So those shops they have employees. There's a shop some friends of mine went to a shop in Wyoming recently, and they had probably 10 employees doing taxidermy or doing some various part of the taxidermy, whether it's preparing mannequins or mounting animals or doing the finish work and the bases. They have a whole like production line. And the owners of a shop like that are probably making really, really good money. So you can start right here just hobbying with doing a few birds. So, any other questions?
of your guys' list? What questions?
Which what? I will not taxidermy. I used to do fish. I don't do fish anymore. There are taxidermists that specialize in fish. They just love fish, and they know how to skin a fish. Or a lot of fish today, you can go in these catalogs and you can find a replica, a fiberglass replica of any kind of fish you want. I can get you a 30-pound lake trout that's fiberglass, paint it, you can get it on your wall and tell people the fish story, how you caught this big fish. But I don't do fish. I used to. And you can skin a fish. You can actually skin a fish and preserve the skin and carve a body for it or buy a mannequin for it and stress the skin over it. I just did should have brought it down. I have it at my shop. 64-inch rattlesnake from Texas. It's 64 inches long and probably that big around at the bigger part. And it's all mounted. They make mannequins for rattlesnakes, and that wouldn't be my favorite thing to do, but I did it because the customer wanted me to do it. So, yeah, reptiles and fish are different compared to, a deer. I wouldn't specialize in that. North American big game, moose. You got a cool moose mount back there. Is that yours?
I wish. My mother-in-law still had a nice
Pretty nice mount. They did a good job. Yeah, for a Shiras, yep. Yeah, there's different types of moose. There's Yukon moose. There's Maine moose. There's, yeah, Shiras moose. Mm.
Well, maybe, I think, let's finish up if you okay with it.
Yeah, yeah. Come up and look at any of this stuff.
See that stuff.
Look at
maybe
these
see some
catalogs, and
techniques, and just show them.
you can come and pick up a book and look at it. And but you can get mannequins for about every type of animal there is, and rocks and habitat. Pass that around. This